Well, good morning, everyone. Today we are talking about building power platforms on leadership. This is the third in a sequence, and I've been really excited about all of them, but I'm going to let you in on a secret. This one's my favorite. Leadership is everything. So before we get started, we are going to send you out a couple of polls so that I can get a sense of who's in the room. And make sure that I am able to speak to everyone. So the first poll is that I'm joining for the first time or the second time or the third time. And if you could go ahead and fill that out for me, that'd be great. Okay, and now just to update, I actually had some open-ended questions that we will go ahead and answer in the chat. So this is the only poll. So as soon as we are able to complete it, that will be great. Okay, I think we're all ready to move forward. So again, happy Tuesday. My name is Regina Jackson. I serve as the president and CEO for the East Oakland Youth Development Center. I've actually been serving in that capacity for 28 years. So I'd like to say that I think I've learned a little bit about leadership. I've certainly been challenged. And today I am excited to share with you leadership approaches, attributes, and storytelling based upon my first-person experiences. So we can go ahead and move to the first slide. As a leader, it's absolutely critical that I talk about what it is that I do. So for those of you that are not familiar with the East Oakland Youth Development Center, we've been operating for 42 years, and our 4 buckets of programming are careers, education, wellness, and art. Now, we have a character-based model, a cascading model, cascading mentorship model. We have trauma-informed approaches to all of our programs. And obviously, that's very critical in today's day and time. So moving to the next slide, I want to say that leadership, it is the sphere of influence. It is the confirmation, the confident way forward. And it's also about persuasion. Oftentimes, leadership is inconvenient, but it's absolutely necessary because leaders actually have vision. They're able to guide and direct people in spaces that they might not otherwise go. Leaders are kind of like the Pied Piper of organizations, of ideas, and of people. So I want to quote someone, not somebody that I typically quote, but I thought it was really a good statement. And this is Sam Walton of Walmart. And what he said is that if you're not making mistakes or bad decisions, that you're not taking enough risk or learning enough to continue growing as a leader. I absolutely believe in this comment that it's only in making a lot of bad decisions that you learn how to make the really good ones. So why don't we go ahead and move forward? So I typically like to identify what the attributes of good leaders are. And there's a lovely word cloud here that speaks to some of it, but I'm going to go a little bit more into depth about these attributes. And they're not in any particular order, but they're all really important. I like to start with integrity. Integrity is really one of the key character attributes, and it invokes judgment. You can have good judgment or you can have bad judgment. Integrity isn't always, it's typically used as a positive thing, but we can make mistakes all the time. And vision is a part of what I consider to be integrity, because in that way forward, people have got to follow you. I want to identify a particular experience that that spoke to vision, and I'll be sharing a lot of them throughout this talk. But one was about 8 years ago. We were completing a strategic plan, again, an idea to identify vision and a way forward. And at the very end of that plan, I decided to make a leap of faith and add a renovation, an expansion. It's about a $12 million campaign. It was interesting because it was only after I made that decision that a bunch of funders followed up with me and said, "We're so glad you did this. We're so glad you demonstrated this vision for EOIDC. We want to be on board with you." And it's interesting because sometimes when you jump out there, you don't actually know if you can do what you're saying you can do. You kind of draw the line in the sand and then make a plan. And I had a lot more support for it than I thought I would. So anyway, that is one brief story around that. So the next characteristic is teachability. As a leader, you have to keep learning, you have to keep growing, you have to keep leading. People are always looking to you. But as civil rights movement of 50 years ago, you know, things have to change. They have to adjust. They have to pivot. So some of the learnings that we take from there, we can add to today's social justice movement, but we have to pivot. We have to change it. And that's what across the nation and across the world people have done. So another example of that teachability is, for me, I was so busy trying to make sure that my staff had all the best training for themselves that I actually wasn't getting training for myself. And as the leader, you want to have the most and the best. And so I was talking to one of my funders. This was probably 12, 13 years ago. And they asked me the question, well, what was the last time that you got trained? And I had to say, ooh, it's been a long time. And so at that time, she said, I want you to find a program that you want. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care where it is, but I want it to be in leadership and I will fund it. Well, these opportunities don't always fall in our lap. And when those opportunities do, I always jump, no matter how busy I am. I researched and I found the Harvard High Potential Leadership. It was a certification and it had a heavy price tag back then. It was about $12,000. But it was the most amazing opportunity that I had had to build leadership skills. I was with 100 people who were from business. I was actually the only one in nonprofit. And it helped me with storytelling. It helped me with confirming my courage and my own vision for not just myself, but the organization. And so that teachability, it's not really like, you know, going out and finding the latest Adobe version. It really is about concepts that will make you a stronger leader. And if we're afraid to do it, that's all the more reason that we need to do it. Because the more fearful we are, the better it's going to make us. So the third characteristic is ability to delegate. You know, oftentimes we as leaders have struggles with this, and we shouldn't. As a matter of fact, if we are committed to building our staff, we have to delegate in order to let them make the mistakes that maybe we've made in different subjects. We've got to give them the opportunity to bake the cake and make sure that they are adding the vanilla and the sugar and the whatever else that needs to go into it. And sometimes we delegate and we kind of wince. But it's also important to recognize that people will not do things necessarily the way you would do them. But as long as they get the basics covered, then you can work with them to mold and shape it into the way in which you want to see it. But when we delegate, we empower. And that is a really, really important tool for your staff. The next characteristic or attribute is communication. Communication is absolutely critical. You know, creating clarity is important for your staff. It's important for your brand. It's important for all those that are listening to you, whether you're on social media or on a webinar like this. And the kinds of conversations that you have when you are communicating can help you to improve org culture. They also help in your coaching. I hope that many of you all are coaching your staff, are coaching the young people that you serve, or whomever the subject focus is. And communication is absolutely key. I mean, how many times have you had like an HR issue bubbling up, and then you sit down with that person or persons, and by talking through the things, that person recognizes that the problem that they thought they had, they didn't really have. They were just nervous. They were maybe a little even paranoid. But through the clarity of the expectation or of the problem-solving measure, you can typically make a much more positive outcome. And when you're communicating the brand, it's all about inspiring and empowering. And the more clear that message is, the more, I don't know, for me, when I see a really great post or read a really great blog, I get these bumps on my arm, the hands, the hair stands up, and I get chills. And that's when I know I've been touched. So moving on, the next thing is about charisma. Now, everybody is not the eloquent speaker that Barack Obama is, or has that kind of magic sense to them. And you don't have to. But what you want to be is approachable. You want to always make sure that when you're meeting people for the first time, and you know, impressions, they matter. That you've got a smile on your face, that you've got eye contact, and that confidence is oozing through you. It's like really managing that elevator pitch, you know, sealing that deal so that it doesn't seem like the message is rehearsed. It seems very communicable. It seems very confident, persuasive even. And for me, I mean, I was a cheerleader in high school. I feel like I've been a cheerleader ever since. It's about wanting to make sure that that person you're talking to is going to be a part of the fan club. Not necessarily your personal fan club, but the organizational fan club. They will want to be a part of what it is you're doing because of the energy that comes through your messaging to them. And that, in fact, is the charismatic piece. Everybody's got it. They demonstrate it in different ways, but I'm here to tell you that confidence, that's the plus. Self-awareness is the next attribute, and that's a part of the larger emotional intelligence. You know, response is everything, and you have to be aware, much like I don't play poker or any of those kinds of things, but you know, oftentimes if you're getting a real bad messaging, you know, you can't be wincing and acting like this is just going to upend your whole life. You have to maintain a sense of composure while your mind is kind of going through all of these questions that you need to answer and all that kind of stuff. And when somebody is bringing you certain concerns or issues or, you know, falling apart, your messaging has to be very clear and measured. And it's kind of like your response can't be, well, what do you want me to do? Your response needs to be framed like, how can I help? That, in fact, by itself is going to give someone else the comfort that seeking you out was a good idea. You have to be mindful of how your posture, how your messaging through your eyes, through your face, through your mouth is coming across. I know that I was told about a experience where someone had shared that their child had gotten jumped, and the person of importance that they were talking to wanted to see the proof. Well, that wasn't very affirming for that mother's experience that they were sharing. And in that moment, that professional was not being self-aware, because in active listening, which is what we all have to do as leaders, our responses to what we're hearing are really critical. So again, self-awareness is about measured presence. It's about composure. It's about choosing the most compassionate words to get more information or to affirm that we're going to be able to resolve this challenge or this problem. Gratitude is next. Now, if we've learned anything inside this pandemic, it is to appreciate the very little things, because the very little things are everything. Health, having a roof over your head, potentially having a job. These are critical. And people are talking every day about telling people that you love them, giving them messages, because we can't see them, we can't touch them, we can't feel them. You know, we only need to take something for granted to be reminded that we overlooked. And I am so grateful to the people that challenge me, to the people that support me, and to even my new puppy, who is just always excited to see me. That's something new. I just got him at Christmas. So anyway, gratitude is critical. So influence is another attribute of leadership. And these days, I think it's more of a social capital thing, right? Because oftentimes it's our voice, it's our words, it's our experience that helps provide influence, provide persuasion, but also the social capital that we've built, our network, our contacts. You know, when someone else says, oh, Regina Jackson knows what she's doing, or don't play, or whatever those things are, you know, it's always more excellent to have someone else saying it on your behalf so that you're not tooting your own horn. And that influence can take you very far. It took me to China, leading young people on a delegation underneath the President Obama's initiative. And I actually went under 2 different initiatives. But it was Congresswoman Barbara Lee who knew my influence in East Oakland through the East Oakland Youth Development Center who asked me to take a group of high school kids from not just my agency, but 4 different ones, mold them together into a delegation to represent the President of our United States. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the point is that your excellence as a leader, your expertise on specific subjects, those are all the things that help to contribute to influence. I've just got a couple more, and then we'll go through the slides. So empathy, really, really important in terms of building a healthy culture for your organization. We decided to create a trauma-informed care space here because empathy and compassion are critical. And it has worked so well with our families and our kids. Courage. So the courage to risk, the courage to reach out and put oneself on the front line. We have to have that in every movement. Respect. You know, nobody's really going to listen to you if they think you're talking down to them. Nobody's going to want to emulate you if they don't respect you. And quite frankly, it's not that important that people like you, but it is critical that they respect you. And the final one is problem solving. You know, you can't let your problems be the problem when you're leading. I've gone through divorce. I've gone through being stalked. I've gone through an attempted mutiny on the Bounty. You can call it an overthrow if you want. But never in those instances did I complain about them. Did I put them out front? I wasn't going to let my problems be a problem. Moving on to the next slide. I realize that was a long one, but we'll move faster. So leadership lessons. I've been sharing a few of them as we've gone through, but I want to say that, you know, speaking up when it's not a popular thing to do is really important. And then the things that I've learned from my mentors, those have been really impactful, but there was nothing like having a first-person experience that taught me something. So on the first day that I started at EOIDC, I had to announce that I was going to be laying off 2/3 of the staff. I was going from 42.5 positions to 12. Why did I do it on my first day? Because it was literally 6 weeks before the new year, the new budget. And I thought, better to demonstrate compassion and give people 6 weeks notice than 2. On a separate scenario, I think it was day 2 or 3 that I started going around to the nearby churches and organizations that we had relationships with. The doors got shut in my face. They said, you know, there has been so many leaders in the last few years at EOIDC. Once you've been there a year, you come back. Well, that was rejection. If I'd ever felt it, I wasn't ready for it. But what I decided to do was I wrote down a year, and a year to the date, I went right back to those folks. So persistence, resilience, and compassion without a chip on my shoulder was a really, really important lesson for me. And it was actually quite impressive to them because everybody had very positive responses. They were actually a little surprised that I took their comments to heart as much as I did. Back in 2008, when the economy just fell apart, I went from 6 days a week to 5, but I told everybody then, as I have done during the pandemic, you do your job and you do your job well and you will have a job. I make that commitment to you. And then I just fundraised the hell out of myself to ensure that I could keep my word, because my word was everything. So we'll go to the next slide. So I brought this up, and I've kept it in each of the other presentations because I think it's just been so critical how social justice has really bubbled up over this past year. You know, those of us that have been in the fight to particularly help the most disenfranchised recognize that we've been dealing with social injustices. But this time, it seemed like in concert with COVID, you know, that we basically had two really big issues to deal with, to grapple with. We had two pandemics, if you will. And social justice bubbling up for us gave us an entirely new way to fundraise. You know, social justice was always kind of an underpinning of our programming, but we never really called it out. And so one of the things that we did was to add it to our theory of change, that along with positive identity formation. And it wasn't new to people. We'd been marching, we'd been protesting, we'd been speaking up. But in framing how we were doing so, we were able to open up an entirely new route to funding. And in some instances, I think kind of got the eyes and attention of a lot of folks that had not previously been paying attention. And from that perspective, you know, leadership was really critical to kind of make that pivot. To the next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that one of the critical things, attributes of leadership was really around teachability. I also mentioned going to the Harvard High Potential Leadership Program. And this is part of the growing perspective that I'm talking about. Now this slide pictures me in front of TED, and I did do a TED Talk. This was back in, 2017. How did I come to do this? Well, I think it was more important what my journey was getting ready to be. And that journey was about really trying to document the leadership, the stances that I'd taken throughout my career. And so I started writing. And sorry, I lost my light here. Okay, thank you. And I started writing in order to write a book, which I'm working on right now. So I started writing blogs, and then I became a Huffington Post blogger. That was a growth for me. It was a challenge, but it was a great challenge because I was becoming a better writer. Delivering public speaking capacities. I'd given speeches before. I'd given commencements. I even got an honorary doctorate and had to do the commencement for a college graduation. But I'm here to tell you that the TED experience was really, really critical. And I was able to talk about that experience of how EOYDC approached young people and got them to take risks to transform their own lives. And it was through the China experience that I was able to illuminate that. So continue to identify ways that will challenge you to grow, that may also allow you to continue sharing lessons, sharing stories about the work. It's all about framing. And we have lots of different opportunities these days. Podcasts, blogs, you know, YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. So I would just encourage you to try and figure out what's going to work well for you. And by the way that I got to do my TED Talk was a part of the DNA of our organization, focused, as I mentioned, on you know, character building as well as cascading mentoring. One of my young people was doing a graduate program, and their project was to produce a TED. And so she reached out to me. So these days, after 28 years, the last 4 or 5 have had a bunch of opportunities that were created for me by my young people. Really, really incredible. So next slide, please. So I've used these as well in our last couple of sessions, because I think that they are emblematic of the kinds of challenges that we've been facing over this last year. I don't know about those of you, but Friday the 13th, March the 13th, we had a gun reform special presentation here. It was a town hall with the Warriors and with Gabby Gifford's group on gun violence. And Monday, the world changed. March 16th, I'll never forget it. I was stunned a week later that we were still like in this space. And it occurred to me in my own, not having an answer, I had to get a plan together quickly because everybody was looking to me. I reached out to a funder and they were really, really responsive. I gave them a couple of kind of top line plans. I was hearing from our kids that are away at college about how they were having to move out of their dorms, or losing immediately their jobs. And so all of this kind of came flooding through. And so putting together an action plan, both with my staff and for the benefit of our young people and our families, that was an important, a critical, actually, pivot in my leadership, because I've been challenged with a lot before. But, a virus, something that I had no sense of its longevity or the fact that it was going to kill so many people. And I tell you, the death of my board president and longtime friend, which happened very early, he died on Easter, really sealed the deal for me that this stuff was not just serious, but it could be our undoing if not managed correctly. And so my staff went through these exceptional CDC protocols and put together a program. And quite frankly, we were one of the only organizations that actually did an in-person summer program. Now, we were committed to that summer program because it's our entirely youth-led program that I developed 27 years ago. But we also knew that it was one time of year that our young people would be able to work like full time. But we wanted to do it as safely as possible. And quite frankly, we were open up until the week before Thanksgiving, when we recognized that there was going to be probably a super spreader scenario. So we were open for almost 6 months without one incident of COVID inside our organization. We modeled with the face mask very consistently. We got our young people involved with mask on campaigns with Alameda County. We led in partnership with so many other entities, the Brotherhood of Elders, who had an African-American COVID response circle. We did more than we even normally do, or I did more than we even normally do, because when people are scared and people don't know where to turn, they look to their leaders, and they look specifically to their community leaders. But everybody's watching. My staff was watching me. The kids were watching me. And so leading during a pandemic or an economic recession provides new and different challenges, but your leadership mask stays on. It is the confident, self-assured, charismatic, self-aware, appreciative, and courageous example that can see you through. And I'm here to tell you that in a single year, we're coming up on a year, except for raising money for the capital campaign, we've never raised so much money. And part of it was because funders fully appreciate the level of depth, thoughtfulness, and problem solving that we put into place. And again, this has been crisis on crisis. My families, we even fundraised to give our families direct money. They got more COVID response from us than the government. Granted, it's been a very, very sad time. It's been a height of anxiety and depression for our families, our kids, but it has been such a excellent teaching mechanism for how to pivot, how to bend and flex, how to be transparent, and how to be focused on success. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, I used these examples in the last two talks because part of leadership is about vision. It's about bright ideas. So some of these bright ideas didn't come from me, but I jumped right on them. The concept of distance learning. I immediately asked my staff, what are the recommendations out there? What are the problems that you're hearing from our young people about? And what are your recommendations in terms of how to ameliorate this? And that's how we came up with the distance learning tips. Our communications staff pulled together the pictures and laid out the messaging, and we went to it. Similarly with wellness tips, we haven't been able to use our gym. But we've had to be outside. Well, most people who have been sheltering in place would not even think to go outside except for the most critical things like grocery shopping. Well, walking is still critical. Moving is still critical. Eating well, drinking water, all of those things have been really, really important. And so, we came up with some storytelling, reading books for our younger population. We came up with a series of bright ideas to engage folks, to help them hopefully face their own fears, recognize that they're not going to die because they walk outside. We also created these Facebook Live parties that gave us up to the moment information from the nation's capital, and got the kids to share what their concerns are, how they were pivoting, how they were moving, so that other young people might follow those good examples. We also put fear out there and had some real conversations about getting tested. And I think that they were very impactful. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about social capital. And here you probably have a few recognizable faces. On the left, Congresswoman Lee that I've spoken about. In the middle, Robin Roberts of Good Morning America. And on the right, Bernice King, Martin Luther King's youngest daughter. One of the things about leadership that is absolutely critical, it opens so many doors, is that your network is your net worth. I know you've heard it before. I'm not saying it brand new. But building social capital, you start with bonding. That's the immediate circle that is around you, right? And then you move to a concept called bridging, which is, those folks like your cleaners and your dentist, and they know people who know people. And then, you have those folks that are even further out that you might never think that you'd meet. We have an iPad lab, and we've had the opportunity to be hosted at Apple. You're always looking, whether it's through building your LinkedIn profile, your social media, or through email, how you can continue to build social capital, because it's in those instances that you can raise more money, you can go further and faster than you thought you could. So an example of this is we were contacted by Gilead. The folks knew our work. This is a health company. We do wellness, but they were actually looking for social justice champions. And they were well aware of our work because of our social capital, because of my social capital. And that brought for us a first time $750,000 grant. It's over 3 years, but the money is large. And it was a scenario where, we filled out an application, we competed for it, but we were able to be invited like so many funders do, because they followed your work, they know about your work. The same thing is true for different funders who want to invite you to events, breakfasts, games, all kinds of things. And this is how we even built our Southwest exposure. We were visited by Martin Luther King III, who wanted to invite us to his national conference on poverty. He was so impressed with what he saw. He gave me 3 tickets, said, bring 2 young people. It was in Washington, D.C. I decided if we're going to D.C., we might as well take a look at a couple colleges because the students I'm taking are seniors. And then we turned that into visits to the nation's capital. We extended it to New York and saw some more colleges and went to a concert. We did some professional engagements, and that was the beginning of our official college tours. And then we were able to use that social capital with Southwest to get them to sign on to fund our college tours. And we've been doing that going into 12 years now, and we've even expanded into international service missions. So again, how you build the relationship, how you build that social capital pays off over and over and over again. Next slide. Building a pipeline for leadership. This is probably the singular most important attribute that I think I've been able to build. This is the muscle for creating that DNA so that students are looking out for each other, creating the opportunity for them to understand the importance of service and coming back to the building. So part of what we have done in building that culture is to have more than 70% of our professional staff are alumni. We are demonstrating every single day that we're building a pipeline for leaders. Our entirely youth-led summer program gives our young people their first opportunities to understand what leadership is, to design curriculum in order to teach classes, to be a part of the management team that hires and sometimes fires, but as well provides, evaluations and feedback. They organize the field trips. They learn first person what it is to be. In addition to that, our young ones, whether they're in book clubs or on field trips, whether we're doing special presentations here, you've got a young MC, like 6 or 8, followed by a older MC. So everybody's having the opportunity to understand what leadership is, understand not just the shine, but also the responsibility, and to take it very seriously. I remember when one of our 9-year-olds said that they wanted to lead a tour of the building because we were doing them all the time. And, I said, okay, well, what is it that you think that we should be doing? She was like, well, we should have a special vest and we should know something about every room. I could tell them what my experience is. And I said, wow, that sounds amazing. Listening to young people is the first step of leadership. And then giving them what they want, especially when it's well thought out, is the affirmation and the empowerment. And then other kids see it, and so on and so on. So I want to say this, that, it's the hardest work, because not all of our kids make all the right decisions, and we end up having to lead by helping them find attorneys to represent them if they've, been accused of a crime. We sometimes are having to help them find extra funding to be able to stay in college, or to provide lots of counseling when they've had loss or have depression. It's a very difficult thing, but it pays off over and over and over again. So that is really the end of my presentation. We do have about 15 minutes for questions, and I'm sorry I should have ended a few minutes earlier, but I had a lot of stories to share. So sometimes if you don't feel like being strong as a leader, be strong anyway, because your being strong gives tacit permission to others to be strong too. Are there any questions? How has your leadership been tested during this time? Do you want to go deeper into any of my experiences? Thank you very much for the positive comments. I'm really interested, would love to answer any questions that you all have. I do want to also provide some resources. The Center for Creative Leadership that we've had partnership with has some extraordinary concepts, ideologies, and shared, experiences. The Bible is an extraordinary leadership tool. I particularly love the story of Ruth, which focuses on love. We can look at our old civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King, reading his speeches, Benjamin Mays, Martin Luther King's coach and the president of Morehouse, Cesar Chavez, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Barack Obama. I mean, hell, Amanda Gorman, looking for leadership examples, they're all around you. And one pivotal and a really, really important thing, make sure that your circle, your immediate circle, your first 5, make sure that they're all smarter than you. You want to be in a position where you are always, always learning. That's how we lead. I don't see any questions. I'm really feeling the love. Thank you for all the positive comments. Recognize that if a question comes up after today, my email address is there. I get about 300 emails a day, but I will respond. Let's see, you'd like to speak with me about partnering with your organization regarding an upcoming virtual exhibit through AMLO this year. Oh my God, I love AMLO. I would love to talk with you. Please email me and let me know how we can work together. I would love that. Thank you very much. Appreciate the words of encouragement. I appreciate it very, very much. Leading is hard work. Just in talking to you about it, I'm getting a little choked up because I can think about being stalked. I think about, as I mentioned early on, an attempted mutiny. All this will be in the book. The days haven't always been positive. And it's in those days that you have to recognize how fortunate you are to be in a leadership position. I don't have, someone wants me to feel free to mention my next session. I would love to be able to mention another one. I don't have one scheduled yet, but I'll be talking to Generation Thrive about that because I would love to come back. And certainly if you all have other positive comments or even want to send them directly to Generation Thrive on my behalf, that would be critically important. If you learned something here that you hadn't heard before, please, I'm on Facebook. I've got a professional platform as well as an individual one. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. Please make a comment. It helps me to continue to build my social capital. Wherever we are, we can always grow. But we have to be looking for those opportunities to do so. And those of you who have listened to me today, extend my social capital. I appreciate you very much. Let's see, questions. Oh, thank you. Ahmad says, you are my mentor, little sis. Appreciate that. We still have a few more minutes. We have 8-9 minutes. I can go ahead and roll off some more stories. I have a young lady. She became the first African-American woman ever to receive a doctorate in social work from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Now, prior to her educational achievements, nobody in her family had graduated from high school. So she did that. She was in our Pathway to College program. She went to Cal. She did an international study program. And that's when she decided, instead of being a physical doctor, that she would be a PhD. She took a break from in between the master's and the PhD part to what? Go work for President Obama. Then she came back, and I had the opportunity to be her mentor, to be the one that drove her before the midnight deadline to apply for scholarships. This girl applied for 107 of them and got 37. She is now back in community, leading work right here in Oakland. And she is the kind of example that you look to build. Somebody who wasn't sure she could do any of it. And we kept telling her she could, and we kept putting her in positions to succeed. She taught cooking class in our summer program, but she kept coming back. We have so many of these wonderful stories about this pipeline. A few years ago, I did a success study, and I think I documented about 750 of our graduates. They ended up in 4 specific careers that all tie back to OIDC: wellness, nonprofit, education, and business. These are all the things that every single day we are demonstrating service, the importance of organization, hard work ethic, and character building. And it works over and over and over again. Are there any of you all that were faced with significant challenges during the pandemic that you're still trying to navigate? Please just ask me a question. I'm happy to answer. Okay, well, since we don't have any more questions in the queue, I will share a couple of other scenarios. At the end of this year, I actually plan to make my transition. After 28 years, I feel like I have built a strong bench of support, and I'm going to try and figure out what's my next. And I don't, in fact, know what that is. I am committed to writing this book. I am doing more public speaking and webinars like this, which are really helpful to me to organize my thoughts and present them in ways that hopefully make sense. I am completing a certification for a healing-centered coaching experience. And while I've been coaching for years and years and years, I'll finally have an international certification for it, which is great. And it'll give me a whole nother vantage point of how to, hopefully make some money and impact the community. I am really focused and dedicated on building the transition plan so that I make sure that once I leave, that my leadership is kind of fully confirmed. I want it to succeed without me seamlessly, because in that is a real affirmation of my leadership. This is and has been the best career of my life. When I was first asked to come aboard, they wanted me to sign a 5-year contract, and I refused to do so because I'd never been anywhere more than 2.5 years. I wasn't sure that I could even commit to it. But I kept finding ways to grow myself and address issues inside the community, inside our organization. Through that, we built the Pathway to College program because we'd only had a GED program in place. And that wasn't an effective message to have futures and visions and dreams for kids. The After School Leadership Academy was a 5-day-a-week homework response so that our kids who were having questions and not understanding could actually work with somebody to help them resolve those questions. The cooking program, we live in the middle of a food desert and kids are hungry. But through the cooking program, not only are kids able to eat more nutritiously and make better choices for their bodies, but we've even turned out some pretty outstanding chefs. If you're looking at your job right now, think about what is possible, what nobody's done before. And not just because nobody's done it, but because maybe it's been overlooked, that it's a need, that it's a benefit. That's what real leadership is. I mean, I can't write a stick figure, but I am creative as hell when it comes to program design. But usually it's because there is a problem there and there's an opportunity. And nonprofit gives you the flexibility to fill that void. With good communication skills and great social capital, you can fund it. And there you go. We only have 2 more minutes. I feel like folks may be satisfied with what they heard, and I appreciate that. I want you to know that leadership is not a state of mind, it's a state of being. And I'll remind you, if when you look around at your best friends, at your circle, your support circle, if you are always the teacher, you're in the wrong circle. We always have to be good students. We have to be good followers in order to be good leaders. And it can sometimes be challenging. We kind of like being confident and, in charge. But try being a number 2. It will grow you in ways that you hadn't anticipated. Listen to your kids. Have them challenge you something around the house, whether it's a cooking or being a better cook or taking a bike ride. I don't know. I know during this pandemic, I have become a healthier eater. I have been more physically fit. And I have had more energy to fight these beasts that are here with the pandemic, with ignorant folks, with mentally ill challenges. I am in the worst scenario of the world, feeling so confident and so positive about tackling the beast. I want to thank the Generation Thrive Agency, Ayana Moody especially, but Annalise and Adil and our new staffer, Brittany, for giving me the opportunity to address you all. It's been exciting for me, fun looking back on the lessons, and I appreciate your partnership in listening and your encouragement. I think I'm signing off now. See you out there. Keep leading.